Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I think we are waiting for a few more folks to join in, so I'll just give it another minute. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon and welcome to the AMA New York panel on Workplace Series. This is the third of our session around Workplace Series, and this is focused on AI, as you all know. The goal of our series from a workplace standpoint has to be really help marketers navigate this ever-changing world of marketing, and Gen AI, of course, is the latest in all of that. And yes, it's on the agenda everywhere. If you have been to Brand Week, ANA, or any of the summits, this is certainly a topic that everybody's talking about. But I'm really excited to have this esteemed panel to help us sift through this. I know many business leaders are talking about it in your organizations, political leaders. President Biden just issued an executive order around this just about a week ago. The Prime Minister of UK just hosted an AI safety summit. So a lot happening in this space, not just in marketing, but at a higher sort of societal and business cultural level. And there's reports from McKinsey talking about how much this can impact productivity. So a lot happening. And honestly, this is where our panel that I will introduce shortly can help us sift through this, determine how do we navigate this as you're looking at your marketing ecosystem, and how you can use it to enhance your expertise. So please join me in welcoming our panel, Jennifer Chase, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of SAS. Some of you might be familiar with SAS. SAS is an AI data management and analytics software company, very much an early, pioneer in this space. And Jennifer is able to provide both the view from an early AI standpoint, but also as a chief marketing officer who oversees go-to-market strategy, as well as product marketing, brand marketing, and growth marketing. We also have Jitendra Singh, who is the global head of data and analytics at Accenture Song. Jitendra leads the data intelligence practice, and Accenture, as you've probably heard, is investing significantly in this space, and I'm sure there's a lot of great insight from that Jitendra will bring to this panel. We also have Abhi Vyas. Abhi is the head of marketing, personalization, and analytics at Verizon. Verizon, of course, is one of the leading marketers, and Abhi's role entails bringing digital innovation into the areas he oversees from a CRM standpoint, loyalty, and personalization. And then lastly, Alan Schulman. Alan is a leading voice from a digital creative and creative innovation standpoint. He is the co-founder and CEO of Upper Right, which is a customer experience consultancy. And Alan just spoke recently, actually, at the ANA Masters of Marketing about this topic. So we're super excited to have this panel. We have such a great diverse mix here. Both in terms of brand side as well as consulting firms, the different functions that this group represents, from data and analytics to creative. And we are going to get right into it. But before we do, I also want to thank our sponsor, Channable. Channable is a commerce acceleration technology that is behind 8,000 retailers that sell more online. It is a all-in-one built for e-commerce solution that can make it easy to accelerate commerce more cost effectively. You can learn more about Channable at channable.com. And thank you again to the Channable team for making this happen. So we will dive right into it. But before we do, a couple of things. We will have a very lively discussion, hopefully, and then get into a Q&A towards the end. If you can, we would love to see faces. If you can turn your videos on, I'm sure that always excites the panelists to actually see a live audience. We would love that. And we are going to quickly do a little pulse check of this room just to get a sense of the sentiment of our audience. So Nancy, if you can please do the Zoom polling. There are 3 questions we would love for our audience to answer. It's just a yes or no. And the intent here is for our panelists to really understand your mindset so that they can gear the discussion to you. So just go ahead and answer these 3 questions. Number 1, I'm concerned about what Gen AI will mean for my role. Yes or no? Number 2 is I know how to get started meaningfully incorporating Gen AI into my day-to-day responsibilities. And number 3 is I currently use Gen AI for marketing projects, or I'm experimenting with it. And we'll just look at what that picture looks like. And Nancy, let me know when we can see the results of the poll. Awesome. Well, it looks like everybody can see here, we have only 35% concerned about Gen AI, which is amazing. A very sophisticated group here and clearly early adopters. I know how to get started meaningfully incorporating this into my day-to-day job, 55%, looking pretty good as well. And then lastly, I'm currently experimenting with Gen AI. Wow, a 73%. So we definitely have a very sophisticated group here. So let's get right into it. The first part that we're just going to talk about is just what's happened with Gen AI over the last year and the current state of AI. So I want to open it up for our panelists, Alan, Jennifer, Abhi, and Jatinder. Would love to hear from you. Maybe, Jennifer, we can begin with you on what is the current landscape of Gen AI.
Yeah, happy to go first. Ladies first. I love that. Thank you, Rafika. It's exciting to be here. I think one thing that's maybe grounding for us to start with is AI is not new, right? AI has been around for decades, and in fact, I know many of you have been using it. If you're using next best offer or chatbots, you've been using some sort of AI. Now, make no mistake, the introduction of ChatGPT is transformational in a generational technology transformational way, and so at its core, though, it's creating content, is creating text, images, video from existing content. And for me, it's been really exciting just to see the arc of the past year of where we've come as a society and as a profession of marketers with our understanding of AI, and then specifically the understanding and implications of generative AI. And I'm sure many of you can think back to a year ago when ChatGPT was introduced. There was probably some hesitancy to now to me it feels like this exciting new frontier that we get to be on the ground floor of designing and exploring.
Thank you. Alan, you're up next on my screen.
Would sure. Hello, everyone. And again, want to thank you all for joining, and really honored to be here. I'm just extremely excited about the art of the possible with Gen AI. And I think from a creative and a content standpoint, look, anything first generation, we're always a little hesitant to see, like, does it really work? Is it really, can it really do what they say it can do? And I think some of the early things that we've all probably experimented with, some of it, certainly the speed and pace at which stuff can be created is really fascinating to watch. Is it authentic? Is it actually factual? Is it honest? Can it do everything we can say it is? I think it's still early days to sort of see, sort of the efficacy of how some of it's working. But I'm really excited about it, literally at sort of every point in the sort of creative and content development chain. From, I think Gen AI is going to give us way deeper insights to inform what creative to make. I think it's going to sort of standardize our sort of initiation and intake process for how we create content in marketing. It's definitely jump-started ideation in a huge way, whether you're naming something, branding something, just in terms of exploring ideas for jump-starting creative, it's huge. It's expanding the actual pace of design and creation. We've all seen what some of the image generation and text generation tools can do in terms of just really very fast sort of outputs. The question is fast good? So we're still sort of looking at that. Automated production is definitely, it's as you said a minute ago, Jen, it's already automation. AI's already been around in the automation space. Gen AI is going to automate content production and creative incredibly. It's accelerating distribution to programmatic and other sorts of paid media and other platforms. And frankly, I think it's going to help us optimize, Rasika, creative. It's going to help us optimize in ways that we haven't been able to optimize in
Yeah.
near real time. So literally every point around that sort of campaign and content development process, I'm really excited about the potential of it. Still a lot to work out though.
Yeah, yeah. And Abhi, what about you? What do you see as the current landscape? What are you excited about?
Well, I mean, thank you, first of all, giving me a chance to be on the panel, and really excited to be, sharing some of what I have been seeing on the AI space. And if anybody is, following closely, OpenAI's, first developer conference, which is happening, they just announced they've reached 100 million users. And talk about a landscape when we thought that who would challenge the Google search. Here we are, 100 million people actively searching, not going to Google, but starting their journey on ChatGPT. And yesterday they announced their, turbo version, which, now they've created a marketplace and they've invited these, chatbot developers to come and develop apps. So I think they're hitting both companies, Google and Apple App Store, simultaneously. So I mean, it's a very fascinating moment for technology. This moment when you think that nothing is changing, something comes up and they shake up the whole thing. So really exciting moment. But again, as Alan touched about trust, safety, and all, we'll get into it. But just to begin the conversation.
And Abhi, to your point, Bard has been around for longer than ChatGPT, but somehow ChatGPT just took, over public imagination somehow. So Jatinder, would love to hear from you. And if you can help us break down what, just what made, if you have a view on how and why this happened last year and just the pace of it suddenly, because as you've all mentioned, it's been around for a while.
Yeah, and it has, it's been around since 1954, right? So almost 70 years, right? So a bunch of Dartmouth professors went on, rather than going on vacation one summer, decided to try and get a computer to emulate a machine, right? And they were somewhat successful at that point. So that's the genesis of it. And as you mentioned, and Jennifer did there as well. And then there's applications, obviously, to marketing for decisioning. So those have long been around to inform things like next best action, right? And then that was AI and machine learning, and computing power at that point in time enabled us to do that. We then went on to deep learning. This is kind of a third limb for all of us, right? So now we have deep learning algorithms that are able to we're able to analyze much more complex data in real time for authentication. And so iris recognition, facial recognition, voice recognition, used by organizations that hold very sensitive data, be they financial services clients, be they governments. So again, we saw computing power grow, and therefore the ability to analyze and interpret data, complex data, we were able to do that and make decisions. So those were both decision-making sort of like tools, from AI machine learning to deep learning. So it's looking and saying, this is what we should do, this is what I think you need, this is who I think you are, to now, this is what I can make, as Jennifer mentioned. So that could be in terms of content. It can be in terms of, text and images and videos and so forth. So that's the next chapter that's leapt forward. And that is because of the exponential growth in computing power, the 1.7 to sort of like, I think it was 17 trillion parameters, that can now be analyzed. So it was that leapfrog moment of really it becoming the iPhone moment. And I think, with any technological advancement, the first place that people are immediately going to is performance. So we have a client spends $4 billion a year on content production. Immediate ask was, I want to spend $2 billion. I want to get the same level of performance, and I want to drop the other $2 billion to bottom line for EBITDA. That all makes absolute sense, right? And so those were the use cases that were coming out at the beginning, which were, I want to do more, I want to do it for less, I want to do it faster. As with all technological advances, and we're all sort of like in the business of understanding human behavior and also sort of like driving human behavior. So now we're saying, okay, that's absolutely a necessity. How do we use it to understand human behavior as well? So we're starting to look at, how do I understand emotion? How do I understand the senses? And an example of how we're now moving from performance to understanding humans is, recently received a brief, or we were working on a brief. We're launching a product in 18 markets around the world, and it's in the luxury category. CMO said, love it, can you change the color? So quite, you might think a flippant or a throwaway comment. And, we've had AI and machine learning that's been able to, analyze images. Mexico City looks very different to London, to New York, to Paris. And it would be able to give you a palette, right, as to what those cities look like. And we had Mumbai and Shanghai and so forth. What it wasn't able to do was to give you context. So there's a consciousness to color, and there's a culture of color. So in the West, you wear white for weddings. In the East, you wear white for mourning. Now,
Right.
AI could have given you a palette, but then you would have still, and we still need humans. We talk about co-piloting and needing humans and machines, but it's able to take that next level as well, right? So it's able to give you context as well. So that's
Right.
what I said. We've moved now the conversations that we're having with clients are absolutely in performance, absolutely in cost containment and takeout, to now understanding humans and how do we get to those insights that can actually be used to inform creativity, to widen the aperture of creativity, as we like to call it. And that's all being driven by the exponential growth and power of computing. So that's where we've seen this tipping point happen over the last year or so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great segue into the next area we wanted to talk about is the opportunities, which you already sort of teed up, right? The opportunity to take it from performance into more creativity.
Yeah.
I'd love to open that up, I guess, maybe Alan, to you a little bit. What are some of sort of these areas that you're exploring or areas that you have seen other companies explore with? What are some of those opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen what it can do with text. I think the majority of the copy it's generating, I think we all have recognized it needs work. And as the if it's the co-pilot and we're the pilot as craftspeople or as writers, it's definitely jump-started, giving us lots more to start with. But we have to get in there and sort of massage it. And it's learning from us. It's learning from the things that it's ingesting. So the ability to sort of write something very poetic or heartfelt, it's learning more and more how to do that, and it can mimic that right now, but it's still
Right.
in kind of a mimic mode from a copywriting standpoint. In terms of design and image generation, some just really fantastic things, but let's not forget that human nature, just not just human nature, but nature itself also produces amazing imagery. So I think it's that balance. I saw a recent Nikon campaign that sort of took ChatGPT prompts and laid them over images of the real world. And I think, we can't forget that this isn't a replacement for the real world or for real talent, but it is in terms of imagery, really incredible in terms of just the vast explorations we can do. We're also seeing now, I think, putting together, as a lot of these platforms, including OpenAI, now creating dashboards where you can combine images and text and video and things. And this is what I think ultimately leads to, sort of customer care and customer service potentially being redefined. You're not going to be using a chatbot, talking to your insurance company or your bank on your phone or your computer. You're probably going to eventually see an avatar there. And will that avatar be a real person, or will it be, some sort of mimicked type of, virtual person or, avatar, right? So I think there's really interesting implications on customer service. I'm pretty bullish creatively about what that potential is, because I'd love for us to be able to interact with an actual, something that is more akin to a human relationship than either a call center that's offshore being, informed by AI, a large language model, or just a chat bot. So I think, those efficiency plays that CFOs and COOs are asking for right now, just as a cost takeout, as Jet was just talking about, I think, that's the easy sort of, that's one of the other seductions that's going on right now, is how much cost can we take out of the enterprise. But I think creatively, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning, the art of the possible is pretty exciting right now. If we can sort of get this from mimicking stuff to really creating, and sort of jury's out on that still just yet, but some exciting things.
And Ralph, I'd love to build on that because I
Yes.
think you bring up the point, Alan, that some oftentimes the motive is cost takeout. And
Right.
as I think of the use cases at SaaS and marketing that we are pursuing, it has to meet a certain standard of criteria, and actually criteria that we would want for any technology implementation that we want to have, right? What are the business outcomes that you're trying to drive? Like, what are the
Right.
better business outcomes? Obviously, we want to get greater productivity, but it's getting greater productivity so that we can focus on more high value tasks. And that's really where that human and machine have to come together in a more impactful way. And then I think it's so important that we remember the creative distinction and differentiation we have to have, and that we need to maintain those criteria for any of the use cases. So some things we're practically exploring is, for example, how do you create those downstream deliverables faster? So if I've got promotional, or I've got a webinar, I want to create promotional content around that. How can I get to that faster? How can I create email from a long form piece of content? How can I improve my customer targeting strategies? So I think being really specific about the business benefit that you want to get, and marketers, the more we can speak in the business terms that are meaningful to our business, and then being specific about use cases, I think is really important.
So the speed to market, right? It sounds like
Yes.
what you guys are really focused on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, Alan, I want to add on, Jessica.
Yeah, please.
I think you mentioned about campaigns being created. I mean, Levi's just launched a campaign where they uses all models created by AI. I mean, and they were all like diversity models, and they went to lalaland.ai, had the models created all by Gen AI. So now, is that the future of marketing? Is that what you're looking into? I would like to challenge, the marketers just to be careful, how much AI or Gen AI, you can use to replace the actual models. That's one part of it. And second, we need to look at what's the low hanging fruit, because cost, of course, it's not easy. It's not cost effective to deploy these LLMs. They are very, very expensive. And companies who have deep pockets, I mean, they can do it. And how much is the value by deploying those LLMs is bringing to the organizations? Let's talk about like automation and all, but then, the cost to deploy is roughly around, $700,000 to $1 million a day. So now if I go to my CFO and tell them that, okay, well, I want to deploy LLMs and, change the marketing or customer service, but what's the cost? What's the return or investment that massive investment will driving in terms of productivity?
Yeah. And I think, Abhi, you started to touch a little bit on this. There's obviously tons of opportunity when it comes to driving productivity, speed to market, creativity, but there's also a whole slew of challenges that I think everybody's grappling with and getting their arms around a little bit. And you talked about that. At what point do you actually have real models, or you make models? So let's open that up, in terms of the challenges, the risk. I know there's a lot of conversation around responsibility and AI, and this is going to be a meaty part of our discussion, so we'd love to get into that. I guess who wants to, Alan, would you want to open that up in terms of challenge?
Yeah, it's risky. I saw a mashup of Barbie and Oppenheimer, that was done where, the two plots of the two movies were put together. It's out there on YouTube. It's called Barbenheimer. I mean, you can see it. It's, I mean, we're infringing on, celebrities, likenesses, we're sort of, recreating characters. I mean, anytime a new technology surfaces, people sort of take it out to its nth degree as quickly as possible. And I think for brand marketers, particularly, there's, the questions that you need to sort of ask yourself, like, what's authentic? Is there human oversight? Is the quality of this, are we just going to over rely on this stuff because it's fast? And I think we need informed consent. I think we need to, really be careful about, there's a lot of watch outs, which is just because we can just do it and can create it doesn't mean we should. And so I think that, whether or not it's intellectual property rights or warranties and indemnities, all the things that we as professional marketers have to do to make sure that we're safely and securely deploying this stuff, back to sort of Abhi's point, which is, the cost of the real cost of actually deploying something like this could be high. And just because it's seductive to want to do it doesn't mean it makes financial sense or business sense to do it. And so, I just think, from a creative and content perspective, find those people on your team that can go start to play with this stuff and, go play with it and be innovating with it. But in terms of actually going from early adoption to actually scaling it and integrating it, I think, you sort of have to see what's ready for the marketplace. So far, we know Adobe Firefly is one application that we know has, is safe and secure and that we can use for images. So that's one example of something that's not, that's sort of ready for market. But, in the text and copy generation area, there's still some, sort of, are we safe to deploy copy that's, that's generated through AI? So I don't think we're 100% there yet. So I'll kick it off with that. Love to know, Jeff, what you think.
Yep, I can go next. Thanks, Alan. So yeah, I mean, like with every, again, technological advancement, there are obviously, we need to do that in a responsible and ethical manner. We have a responsible AI unit. It's not something new. We've actually had it up and running for 8 years. So again, Jennifer, you mentioned AI has been around for a long time. So we've always been operating within those parameters. And I always bring my friends from our responsible AI team to every sort of like, significant meeting that we have. We've gone from having meetings in the old world of it just being the CMO. We then moved to having meetings with the CMO and CTO and CIO. We've now added another stakeholder, which was always involved, but it was probably further down the line, which was sort of like the risk compliance officer that has a legal background as well. So we're bringing all 3 of those people in at the beginning now. As I said, went CMO, then more tech, and now tech and legal. So, we're having those conversations directly one-on-one. Also obviously ensuring that the models are built in a responsible and equitable manner as well, so having transparency around the data, what's going in there to ensure that we're addressing bias as well. So those are the conversations that we're having with clients as well when we're looking to leverage these technologies. I do believe, like every technological advancements, costs will go down. So we are going to see, some of those costs that are prohibitive now will be reduced over time as well. But then building, as I said, these models in an equitable manner, and then addressing use cases that we can really scale across businesses. So that's how we're using it across what we call the front office for sales, service, marketing, growth, and product innovation. And I think we all know that it's going to impact sort of like, the customer agenda 70%. So this is where it's all going to be deployed in the world that we all work in, which is obviously why there's so much interest, and also why there's so much investment that's being put in, into these technologies as well.
And does that unit, because you guys are so big at Accenture, are there use cases that you're seeing sort of bubble to the top that are sort of near term, like low hanging fruit that you're seeing? Is it mostly in the marketing and content area, or where are you seeing it surface the most?
So yeah, it's in marketing and content. So, you mentioned sort of like copyright usage as well, ensuring that you have the data to the lowest level of fidelity. So if I did create a synthetic image, and you need to ensure that it goes back to the source, so you can sort of like, give credit to the talent that that hybrid synthetic image was created from. So definitely in that space of content creation and IP for sure, as it pertains to marketing. Absolutely, yeah.
And I guess I'm also curious, so, there is a lot of talk about AI safety from a global standpoint that political leaders are actually just starting to contend with.
Yeah.
Are there any conversations from a marketing board standpoint or a community standpoint that you guys have been involved in, or anything happening there that you can, obviously Accenture is doing something. So yeah, we'd love to hear that, Jen.
I think the ANA is doing some really great work around this right now, and it's been based off of getting feedback from marketing leaders, both client side and agency side, and are putting out a set of guidelines. And look, I think this is so important for our profession. I think the level of understanding marketers need to have around this, and then how to apply not just AI, but generative AI technologies in a responsible way is so critical. So I would lean to the ANA. I think they're doing a really nice job in terms of setting out a set of standards that we as marketers should be aspiring to.
No,
And
but Jen, to your point, a generic framework will not cut it. I mean, think about a specific application of Gen AI, for example, cybersecurity versus, Gen AI using in testing. I mean, these are like totally two different nuances, and we cannot have a general framework that can support. So I think it's up to the lawmakers, how to influence it. But I think there's a lot of challenges other than cost and safety, which is of paramount importance to the companies.
yeah, and another area that I want to delve a little bit more into is like the trust in data piece. I know when we all talked before, that's that's the underpinnings of this, right? So I guess, Albi, do you want to speak to that maybe? The data and the models you actually use. And honestly, I mean, there's things like hallucinations that people are talking about. So can you guys maybe speak a little bit more about that area as well?
Sure. I mean, we can pick up just one example. Go ask ChatGPT, I'm going to Barcelona, suggest me a trip, right? So now you will get a very beautiful, short, concise, whereas if you search on Google, you will get, 8 to 10 different links. But now as a user, will you trust ChatGPT's output versus, or you would go to 10 different links which Google shared with you? And ChatGPT, in fact, gives you, okay, here's the restaurant you can go for dinner. Here's the restaurant on day 3 you can go for dinner. But what was that restaurant name fictitious, or was it even correct? I mean, that's for us to find. But again, yes, I think hallucination and the trust. Again, in academics, we always point out you have to source your citation. You cannot write a paper if you do not have source. So now if I ask ChatGPT, what's your source for this recommendation? 200,000 websites? I mean, can you cite them? So I mean, these are like a lot of challenges, trust, safety, and how do you believe the content which these LLMs are spitting out, the authenticity of that content? I think that's something, which we have to really challenge. I mean, if you're writing a code is fine. I mean, it'll give you a very basic, in fact, like a very high level code can be generated, but then somebody who's more experienced has to, parse through that code and see, does that really work?
Yeah, how many times have you found yourself correcting ChatGPT and telling it in conversation that it's incorrect? And then it either apologizes to you for the mistake, or it says that you're incorrect. And here's the proof, and then it cites a link. I heard a CMO recently ask the question, well, I know how to optimize my content for search. How do I optimize my content so my brand shows up in the answer of a large language model? So that's just a whole other relevant question that I think marketers are asking, which is, I know how to get keywords. I know how to get my brand to surface in Google results or search results. How do I make sure that I'm going to show up in the result of a large language model? I don't think we know the answer to that question, unless we just think of this as a plugin, because, well, let's face it, LLMs are just a plugin, right? And we're seeing all these plugins, these GPT plugins that are now available. And we're going to have an app store, as you said, Avi, of GPT types of functionality for specific applications. Is it just that we're putting a conversational, module on top of a plugin? And can that conversational model be trained to surface our brands and just as a search engine does? I think these are really interesting questions that marketing is asking right now.
Yeah, and building upon those points, Raska, you mentioned sort of like hallucinations, which I think, all of us have talked about, humans and machines, and, continuing to work together. Because I think we've all also had the dystopia, utopia conversations that come with this technology. So again, the humans and machines, it's to stop things from falling off. We're putting guardrails around it to sort of like, to minimize and to learn along the way. And Alan, as you were describing that, it makes me think of a conversation I had recently in Australia where a CEO of a telco said, what does an AI native company of the future look like, and how do I become that? So, we've been talking about digital native organizations for north of 15 years. And she was the first one to me to say that. So as you were describing that, how can I get into an LLM versus how do I do SEO, SEM? How do I do GAO, sort of like, optimization, right? And ensure that I appear in that. So these are some of the, things that we're all wrestling with and are all learning, sort of like, learning along the way as well as to how do we ensure that we are sort of like, top of those searches so that when we are looking for a trip to Barcelona, it's authentic, it's real as well, and it's personalized for me, right? So things are going to shift dramatically as a result of that, for sure.
I think it's important for us all to recognize too that the result of what comes from generative AI is a reflection of us. It's a reflection of the content that we put out there. It's also, we got on this part of the conversation with, it's a reflection of bias that we may have, whether intended or unintended. And getting back to the data, I think that's an area where marketers really need to level up their understanding of the quality of their data, whether or not that data has inherent bias in it that needs to be understood, so that offers that you're making, engagements you're having with your customers, you're not perpetuating and scaling bias. That is a real concern. And I think for marketers, we probably have consumed AI, and now we're in a place where, because of the beauty of where we are today, we can be both the creators and consumers of AI. But with that comes great responsibility. And I think we, for the sake of our profession, and for the sake of advancing society, we've got to be really cognizant of that as we move forward. I mean, one thing that we're implementing within SaaS just to help us with this is this notion of model cards, and think of it like a nutritional label for food, but it essentially tells you what is in this packaging. Like sometimes it feels like a bit of a black box, but it really isn't. There's technology that's explainable in there. So trying to make sure that everything that we apply in the marketing organization, that it's transparent and explainable, and therefore we're able to identify and mitigate if there's any biased or risk inherent in what we're applying.
So Jen,
I know, Jen.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying, I mean, you talk about humans being biased, Gen AI is even more biased, I mean, you can get examples. Just go to like Stable Diffusion, or, just do any image search and search for show me images of, or the color of imagery for, let's say, janitors or cooks and all. And you will realize, how that bias it is, all, the darker color of skins are kind of showed up on those results. So that bias is already built in. How will you correct that? I mean, that's my challenge, that's, I mean, how do you unlearn? How do you make it unlearn? It's already learned now, right? And it's giving you those answers.
Right. And I was going to ask that question too. So like the people that are actually then putting the labeling on the packaging, like who is that talent on your team? Is it data scientists you brought in to do this?
Yeah, it's data scientists that we have. And it's really having a lens into the data that you're applying. And so while we've got data scientists that are able to kind of decode that for us, we still put the responsibility on the general marketing population to understand the models behind the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
But Abby, we've got a lot of work to do societally on how do we go about it's literally a reflection of the data that exists today. So how do we begin to better have that represent society as it is today and society that we want it to be?
So I think we need to teach AI to care about people, for AI to be really, really safe and be really, really good. I think humanizing that AI experience, that's our next challenge. Right?
Humanizing in a better way, I guess, right? Or responsible way. So, one more area that came up as a challenge, if we can briefly touch on, is differentiation and distinction. And Jen, I think you spoke to that. In some ways, Gen AI is going to be a leveler of skill sets, and, in some ways maybe take away mediocrity, or, can you speak a little bit more about that? How do you then actually ensure that there is different brand distinction that we are moving towards?
Yeah, there's a great stat from IDC that says by 2026, Gen AI is going to assume 42% of mundane tasks for marketers. And look, I am here for that. Like, how many of us have mundane tasks that we would love to be able to outsource to a team member, or maybe an AI team member that can help us? So from my perspective, I think how we leverage AI to take on those mundane tasks so that we can level up ourselves to do more high value tasks,
Yeah.
which in my mind is bringing in more of that creative distinction. I mean, one of my favorite examples of a marketing campaign that incorporates generative AI, you may have seen it from the World Cup last year, and it was a French company that showed a video of just fantastic soccer plays by the French men's national team. And then at the end, there was this reveal that it wasn't the men's national team. They had actually computer generated the men over the female national soccer team. So great myth busting and excellent and creative use of generative AI. But the creative brief and concept came from humans, right? And so that was a human-led, beautifully creative campaign. And in my mind, I want to see us do more of that as we move forward and apply the capabilities of generative AI.
That's a perfect example of bias that's built into
Oh,
the system.
absolutely.
Yes.
And shining a light on it, right? Like
Yes.
what that's a wonderful opportunity we have as marketers to shine a light on that.
Use of creative
So good.
Shed a light on the bias. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's shift gears a little bit into, a question that's top of mind for many marketers, probably not this group, but, how does this affect my job? And like, what are the talents and skills implications for us as marketers and for companies? So Jatinder, would love to hear what Accenture, how that's, you guys are looking across specific roles, tasks for your company, for your clients.
Yeah, so we as you mentioned at the beginning of the session, recently made a significant investment. It's $3 billion over the next 3 years. And I'm one of the execs that's responsible for that. So it's exciting for sure. And just as Jennifer was mentioning, so we're going to double our talent from 40,000 to 80,000 people that are working in AI. And so, yes, please get rid of the mundane tasks so that they can work on and, think about higher order thinking as well. So that's going to be, first and foremost. And, we're going to do that through acquisitions. We're going to do that through our ecosystem partners and by also partnering with the best universities in the world as well. So to answer many of the questions that are, being posed here. But in terms of some of the careers that we're looking at, again, I talk about widening the aperture of creativity. Mm-hmm. So as somebody, people went, oh, great, 40,000 to 80,000, you're going to just hire a load more STEM people. And I say that as somebody who holds a STEM undergraduate and a graduate degree. And I said, yes, and the and part that we can't forget in this conversation is that we can't forget our liberal arts friends, right? So remember, all these technologies are here to unlock creativity, right? And who better at storytelling than our liberal arts friends? So the left brain and the right brain coming together here for sure. So, prompt engineering, we've heard some misses, but again, that's what is learning the art and the craft of storytelling, right? There's a certain discipline to that as well. So everybody's going immediately to, I need a load of tech people. And I'm like, yes, and you also need a lot of storytellers because these technologies are here to unlock creativity. They're here to unlock experiences. So we can't forget that side of the house and just focus purely on, I now need another 40,000 data scientists. I'll take all the ones I can get, but I'm not going to forget about the people that this is going to are going to be the users of this and that are going to unlock those experiences. So it's twofold is that answer, because I think people immediately just go to, I'm just going to hire a load more tech and data scientist people. So that's how we're doing it. Creative technologists as well. Prompt engineering, I think, is now quite common vernacular. So those are the kinds of careers that are opening up that we're leaning into.
But are you seeing the mix shift? Marketing has always been a good mix of storytellers. So do you see the allocation of that shifting a little bit, or?
I think what I see shifting is the toolkit is going to shift. So maybe the distribution will remain. As I said, when it came about, people are like, oh, you're just going to hire a load more tech people, to get to that 40,000 delta. And I'm like, partially.
Right.
The other partial is I'm still going to have the mix that we have within our, we have 50 agencies within Song around the world. So whatever that distribution is, it needs to remain because we still need to understand human behavior and drive behavior. And to do that and to express that creatively, we now have tools that are able to get us to answers. They need to be tweaked and they need to be unbiased. So the mix is probably going to stay the same, but as I said, it's not just a load of tech people that we're hiring. So very clear about that. Yeah. Does that help? Yeah.
Yes, it does. And
Yeah.
Jen, I'd love to hear, as a CMO, like, how are you looking at talent? What is the kind of mix you're looking at across your teams, and what you're hearing from your peer group?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Jatinder said, is that you need to have both the technology and the creative, and you need to have that within the marketing organization. I think sometimes we've outsourced the technology in some ways, and so now you need to have that embedded within your organization. So I don't think that mix has changed. I think it's the what we talk a lot about is, what are the modern marketing skills? So regardless of what role you play within marketing, you need to have the ability to have an analytical mindset. You need to understand the data, understand the technology as it's changing. You need to be able to be a creative storyteller. You need to have a level of curiosity that drives you to be asking, what's next? What's the art of the possible that Alan said? So we're really looking at defining, and we've defined, now we're going to redefine going into 24, what are the modern marketing skills that we expect of every role, whether it's a creative or technology role within the organization.
And to that point, I think, we have to be careful at this intersection, hate to draw a 2x2, but, at this intersection of systems thinking and storytelling, we have to be careful that we don't put the plumbing ahead of the poetry of our business. We are still very much in the business of, as Jatinder just said, it's behavioral economics, and I don't want to vector off into behavioral economics, but human behavior, we're still herd creatures, and there are universal truths about our behavior that are going to depend on human insight and universal truths first. Whether that gets taught in a large language model or not, or catches up, I still think, to his point, that balance of systems thinkers and storytellers, whether it's in a pilot, co-pilot mode for now, or eventually working together, I still see a bright future for those of us who are knowledge workers, who are going to be able to bring the poetry side to the systems thinking and be able to, do what is innately human, because algorithms don't feel, people feel. And we're still very much in a make people feel business if we're going to motivate them as marketers to do something. So these tools will definitely help us accelerate that, automate that, give us deeper insights. But I think from a hiring standpoint, I just don't see where it's a pure cost takeout play.
Yeah.
And I think that's really short-sighted at the moment, given what we have the opportunity to do at that intersection of systems thinking and storytelling.
And just to add on that one, as you were saying that, I met with a CMO recently, and we obviously showed a lot of amazing thinking and what Gen AI is going to unlock. And she responded to me and she said, and it was a provocative statement, so I made somewhat of a provocative statement back. She went, "Great, Jatinder, all of your team are going to become null and void in the next 3 years because Gen AI is going to automate everything, right? It's all going to be done through large language models, and they're not going to be cost prohibitive anymore." And my response to her was, "That is correct. The day that machines can emote, we will no longer be here, but neither will any of us." So it goes back to the very salient point that you just made there. These are in service of understanding human behavior. These are in service of eliciting an emotion, a behavior, and ultimately a transaction. And so I think we've got to remember why we're all in this business, is to understand, as you said there, Alan, humans, and then to sort of like, to understand humans, and then to do something about it.
Yeah, I love that. But, there is all this conversation that the AI will just get smarter over time, the more data is created, and again, Elon Musk earlier this week was talking about how, there is a real possibility of like AI being smarter than the smartest human being. So is there a world that will actually happen? I'm just curious. Is there a, which gets me to the next question, the future of AI as we see it, right? And the future of AI, again, is like so time bound. So like 1 year, 3 year, what do you guys see happening in the next?
We hear all these warnings, from, even the CEO of OpenAI. I mean, we're hearing these warnings, and, for those of us who have kids, it reminds me of that movie, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. It's like, when do we hit that point where we've made this machine that, is making food fall from the sky, and it's just, we can't get it to stop, right? That's the sort of the narrative of that film. And I think that we're sort of hearing from the people who've developed this technology that there's a lot to fear, although we don't quite know what that looks like yet. I'd love to hear what the rest of the panel thinks.
I would like to, put a different spin to it. I mean, the way I see it, I mean, look at our, medical costs, right? Typically, we are spending around 1/4 of our GDP is on, curing the illness, right? And I was speaking to, a CMO of a big pharma company, and her remark was that, well, with Gen AI, our speed to market of drugs would be cut in half. So instead of doing all these tests and all getting learnings in 1 year time, we can get a new drug to cure a disease. So I asked her a question. Okay, why can't you use Gen AI to actually use food as a science? Because food itself has an inherent properties that will not make a human sick. So why can't you design a certain kind of food which can be utilized by humans so that A, they do not get heart attacks, B, they do not get cancer? Why you are spending money on Gen I to reduce the cycle of the drug? Why not spend the money on the preventive part? No answer. So that's what I would like to see, Gen I do something, to help the human race.
Progress, yeah. Jen,
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I'm a optimist by nature. I'm a realistic optimist though, and we have a lot to do in terms of how we look at governing AI. And so I am, and in fact, we at SAS, we're investing in having somebody who's sitting on the National AI Advisory Committee that's advising the president on the technology to help make informed decisions in terms of what we regulate. So we have got to do that. But I do think that there's so much promise ahead if applied correctly. And we've talked a lot about business here today. And I think the real benefits that we didn't explore that really excite me are those societal benefits, like, what is going to be the impact of medicine, both healthcare and pharma, and how can that be done in a more preventative way? To your point, Abhi, how can the public sector take better care of the citizens that they govern? Like, there are so many wonderful societal benefits. Yes, we have to watch and guard against the misuse and application. But I think if we can put our collective mind towards the promise, and I'm going to keep that optimistic approach, that there's so much that AI can do to help society. And that's what I look forward to for my sake in the future and for future generations.
Yeah, and I would sort of like build upon all those points. I'm also a glass half full person, so yeah, good for society. And if anybody can tell you what 3 years is going to look like, I think they're going to buy a private island in the Caribbean and not be on this call.
That's
but
right.
I had the privilege of being on the Cannes Creative and Data jury this year, 417 entries. And Jennifer, you mentioned the French World Cup sort of like campaign there. That was in the category that I was judging. And again, using it for good. There was MasterCard. It was a fantastic campaign of the Ukrainian refugees going into Poland, how generative AI was really using to support sort of like that community, and also showing the impact of GDP on the GDP of Poland, of having these immigrants, come in there. So there were some amazing examples of how generative AI is already being used for good. Is being used for good. So I'm hopeful that there will be more examples of how it can be used for that. Abhi, you mentioned sort of like, yes, let's reduce the time that it takes to bring a drug to market. Let's also look at how can we use it from a preventative standpoint. And so I like to think of it through that lens of being good. Again, every technological advancement has people that use it for nefarious reasons. That's not going to go away with the next chapter of this book. But if we focus on doing good, hopefully it can have an impact on all of us.
Love that. Ending on a high note here with the promise of the technology.
Yeah.
So, this conversation could go on many sessions because there is so much to talk about, but we're almost up on time. And I did want to open up for a few minutes for questions, actually. So if you have questions, feel free to, take yourself off mute and ask them, or put them in chat, or any reflections or any areas that I guess you want to get the panelists' thoughts on.
I could go first if no one else minds.
Please. Yes.
Yes. So in this panel, there was a lot of conversation about, first of all, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Rohan. I'm a social media specialist I've worked in the past as a designer, and so a lot of my thoughts are coming from a very design-based perspective, which is pretty iterative. So the idea is you never really put out the first piece of content out there. You keep going in these feedback loops. And so one of my questions was, we're talking about like this competition of AI versus humans almost. And it primarily stems from this fear of it replacing us or us kind of getting at par with it. But what about the idea of a cyborg, the idea of constantly collaborating with these pieces of technology to the extent where you're no longer even, like it naturally has to mean that you're going to be either at par with it or better than it, in the sense of involving it from the get-go, where you're constantly in these feedback loops where you're talking with it and getting from it and almost using AI to speed your whole process up. So I just love to throw that out there and see what your responses are on that.
Yeah, and maybe I can start off on that. So it's nice to meet you. So again, we're talking about co-piloting, so not one taking over the other. It's a tool just like other tools that you have in the toolkit. So, as you're looking at sort of like developing those design solutions, one of the things that we're also using it for is insight abstraction. So you've got a whole slew of data that would be qualitative and quantitative in nature. So that could be cultural and anthropological in nature, or semiotics, any qual and quant research. And that takes a lot of human capital to sort of like distill that and to get it to a human insight that's going to lead to a brilliant design experience. Now, what we're saying is if there's 100 hours to do that task, there's still going to be 100 hours to do that task. Maybe 20 of them could be unlocked by generative AI because it can give you a seed, right? So it's not going to give you the tree, but it can give you a seedling, and then you can start to nurture that and get to an insight that is going to lead to this transformative design experience. You've still got 100 hours, but you've just unlocked 20 hours of this, because the mundane part is now being done by the AI and the Gen AI. So you've just opened up more time. As I said, I call it widening the aperture for thinking and for creativity. So that's the way that we are developing these solutions, is through a co-pilot strategy, not to replace humans, but another toolkit in their arsenal.
And I would just say, Rohan, nice to meet you, and thanks for the question. It's a great one. Look, you're trained as a designer. I would say if you work in social media, that feeding the content beast of social media and generating content at the speed of conversation, that's a lot of content you have to create. Conversely, what I will say though, to your cyborg point is, you're trained as a designer. When it comes to like things like if ChatGPT can create a stipple style illustration and you're not a trained illustrator, that's a great thing that it can do that. But when it comes to like how much white space is ChatGPT going to know? Like, designers do things very intuitively, and like how much white space to put around a logo is a very subjective thing. I would say that that's where you as a designer are still needed to be able, because I personally haven't seen the level of nuance that real designers bring to what we do as marketers delivered yet and expressed it. You're constantly having to say bigger, larger, smaller, bigger, finer, more resolution, less resolution. I think intuitively designers know how to do that if they're good. So that's where I think your analogy of working with it and alongside it is really going to yield a better result, to Jassinder's point.
Thank you, Alan.
Great point. And we've already always working with technology. Think about that. I mean, before Microsoft Excel was there, you had spreadsheets. It was literally papers of spreadsheet, data would be entered in. It was all manual job, right? But now you're so used to it on Excel, you do VLOOKUPs and you do a balance sheet and the whole thing, right? Now that's being replaced by Tableau. So I mean, our human mind has always been programmed and conditioned to work with co-pilots. And this is nothing new. This is another phase, or maybe a new co-pilot, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I think we're losing a few of our audience here. I want to allow for one more question, but I do want to thank our panelists and all the audience for the time they have given to us. Anybody else have a burning question that we can ask this panel for another quick second? If not, please look them up on LinkedIn. I'm sure they'll all be happy to connect and answer any questions. And thank you for joining our AMA New York series. We will be continuing this next year, so look out for that. And we are going to run a special membership promotion soon, so we would love to have you guys participate in that. Thank you, Abhi, Jitendra, Alan, Jen. This has been amazing. It goes by so fast and still so much to talk about. But thank you again. Very much appreciated.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
everyone. Amazing job.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
everyone. Take care.
Rashika. Nice chatting with all of you. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Thanks.
Take care.
Perfect.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.